Hey, welcome everyone to the first fight card of the year. 2023 is coming in with a pretty sweet lineup, it looks like. We've already dropped about 5 fights, but we still got a good thing going. I think most of you are here from the Discord, so thanks for joining in and checking out my first video breakdown. And if not, thanks for hopping in and checking out my first video breakdown as well. We've been doing the Discord for about a year now. Most of it was free for quite a while, and I still offer free picks as well for every card. And then I opened a VIP service about 4 months ago, and we're up, I want to say, close to 100 units in just the first couple months of us being open. So we've been doing pretty darn well. I don't want to waste too much time on chatting, as there's still a decent amount of fights to go through, and there's some of them that I want to take some key notes on and talk about, and some of them are more of a no-pass situation for me. Just a moment here. Our first one to start off the night is a typical dog or pass situation. You got Sijara Eubanks versus Priscilla Cachoeira. Sijara opened at, I want to say, minus 200 or just under there, and she's quickly swelled to close to minus 300, and Priscilla is now hovering around plus 200, depending on the book. I'm using FanDuel for a reference right now. I've never been on either train on either side of this, either the Eubanks train or the Priscilla train. There's no hype there. There's no set skill set where I've ever been like, this is a side I want to put money on. The fact that Sijara Eubanks is a minus 300 is pretty laughable to me. I'm not shaming you if you bet that side at all. I'm just looking at her record here, and beyond the 7-7, that's just a number. Looking at her record, very inconsistent. Loses people she should lose to, and only beats people she should beat. But this isn't a situation where she should beat Priscilla, I don't think. I see a lot of people harping on her takedowns and her wrestling, Sijara that is. And if you go back and watch a tape, and even her just couple recent fights, she has an okay double leg in the open. But not often are you going to get a blast double in MMA right off the rip, early rounds. Usually you're going to get driven to the cage and have to work from there, and that's usually what happens. She can maybe get a decent double once or an attempt, and then they push themselves to the cage, and Sijara just gets kind of flat, doesn't fight for underhooks, isn't re-attacking the hips like she should and re-engaging. And I've even seen her get reversed and put flat on her back into mount. And I believe that was, I can't remember which fight here, looking at her record. That was in the Gatto fight, the most recent fight. She went for a hip heist, I believe. Tried to hip out and just got reversed completely and was on the bottom herself. Once she was on her back, she didn't have much to offer at all. She went for a lockdown almost immediately and just kind of hugged double unders and sat down. If you do any jiu-jitsu or any MMA training, you know that a lockdown is only good for one thing, and that's keeping you in place. It might keep you safe for a little bit. You might be able to avoid some strikes, but in the long run, you're not going to get much going offensively with a lockdown unless you go for a sweep or something. And that's not what she was doing in that last fight. Priscilla, on the other hand, has kind of been warming up a little bit. I wouldn't at all say she's someone that's in her prime or maybe a top 5 material at all. But I mean, if you look at her past 5 fights, she's 4-1 in her past 5, and one of those losses was to Jillian. Thankfully, we were on the right side of that one. We bet Jillian by submission even as well, and got that done in the first round. But we have not been betting Priscilla as much just because I wanted to see how she built herself up in the rankings and added to her own skill set. When she first came into the UFC, she just was throwing big bombs, winging from the chest, kind of cocking back. And that would gas her early. I mean, she went on a 3-fight stint here. Nevertheless, that first loss was to Valentina, so that's understandable. But recently with her camp, I think she's been working a lot on, I say this a lot in my Discord, optics. She sees the fight. She's really present. She may be swinging, but she's not looking back and going out of a peripheral to fight. She's staying right down the center, even when she's in a firefight. Eyes are open. She'll reset pretty well. You know, sometimes you see this rhythm of 2 fighters bounce one, bounce one, bounce, and they kind of change this, almost like a tennis volley back at each other. And sometimes people don't reset well after that. But Priscilla seems to take her breath, take a moment to reset, and then get back into it again. She doesn't get caught in a wild exchange where she's leaving her chin open as much. And I'm seeing that a lot more in her recent fights, where she's added a sense of understanding that she needs to take her time, because the power is going to be there for her, especially compared to some of these other girls that aren't as built as her. The power will always be there for her. She just needs to find her moment and enter in there. Another thing I noticed is she's pretty good on the exit, and that's a very small thing that not a lot of fighters work on. Exiting from the clinch, exiting from a wrestling engagement, just exiting clean, hands up, or even giving offense on your own when they circle out. Priscilla doesn't let someone get out of her grip or range without making them pay for it or without being smart about it. And I've noticed that in her past couple fights. Sajara, on the other hand, has just little boxing to offer. I think that minus 300 line is just pointing at, I would assume, the wrestling advantage that she does. She has the general wrestling advantage in this matchup. But when it comes to MMA wrestling, it's just not as applicable for her. Priscilla has really good hips. I saw her stuff multiple takedowns in multiple fights. And she doesn't just sprawl, but she hips out and pushes through the drive of the person. So you're not only stuffing and giving some defense to their shot, but you're now going through their shot and giving your own pressure back. And she's even reversed some people once and has a credited takedown for that reason. So all in all, I just don't see the reason to bet Sajara. There's clear value on Priscilla here. No way is she in lock. It's a first fight of the night. It's a women's mixed martial arts fight. Those can be toss-ups a lot. If this goes to the cards, it really just depends on who implemented their game plan better. Could Sajara get those takedowns consistently and keep Priscilla down? I don't think she can. And then the best avenue of victory for Priscilla is to, of course, stay off the outside. Don't let Sajara push you against the cage. And when you circle, make her pay for it. I think she could maybe make Sajara struggle a little bit. I just don't see a lock on either side of this, but I see good value on Priscilla for this first fight of the night. All right, let's move on to the second one here. Bear with me as well. I am using SureDog. I normally use Tapology, but Tapology isn't loading the full fight results on my computer for some reason, and I've tried a different browser. So I'm just going to stick with SureDog here. Another one that is kind of an interestingly wide line that, of course, the favorite is still the favorite here for a reason. I don't doubt Charles Johnson's skill set at all. They're both just very green in the UFC. You know, they're both accomplished professionals. They've both fought in the LFA. I think they both had the LFA title at one point. And Charles has got some good wins. He's got Horyuchi here, Carlos Mota. These are some decent guys that he's beat. But just having that first fight recently, one with Makayev, and two, that was a close fight with Jaglas. We won on that side, thankfully. I think he was a decent odds, minus 150, minus 200, Charles Jordan. But he makes it close. He's clean. He's almost like a knockoff Bobby Green in a little way. He makes fights close, but he doesn't get hit clean. He moves his shoulders pretty well. And I think just like Priscilla in a way, he makes circling and exits benefit him, whether he's giving offense on the circle or he's making sure he's tight on the exit himself. But man, with someone like Jimmy Flick, who is he is a better grappler than Jaglas by a good margin, there could be some room for error for Charles to make. If he got too comfortable in his boxing and forgets to keep his hips heavy and smart feet, not getting heavy when he's planting, and he could get taken down very possibly. And Jimmy Flick is no slouch. I know a lot of this line swelling to the minus 450 side of Charles Johnson is because of the let me double check here, 2 to 3 year layoff for Jimmy Flick. Of course, he even retired officially for a good amount of that time. Let me double check here. Last fight, yep, December 2020. So it's been a full 2 years now since Jimmy Flick's last fight. But he was cruising through. He was an active guy. I actually know multiple of his opponents personally. I know Jesse Bazzi, and he got submitted in the first round by Flick. I know Nate Smith when they fought Contender Series. Nate Smith is an old teammate of mine, very defensive, smart wrestler, and Jimmy Flick made him look kind of amateurish in a way. Uh, and then, of course, the performance with Cody Durden, that was a highlight reel finish. So, Flick has never run out of potential. I don't think that's why this line is here. He's not even coming off a loss. He hasn't been knocked out hard recently. In the UFC, I should say. But I think it's the style matchup and the layoff that is equating to this big line swell and why people are hammering or parlaying Charles. Just his activity, But, man, I don't think we'll be playing this one as much. I won't be talking too much about actual plays in here. But I will say maybe play Charles a little bit, but don't act like he's your top ticket. Flick is still a good rookie, man. He could make a run and do something. I still think Charles gets it done. If you like a line here, I would probably go with maybe an over. I don't think either of these guys are going to take each other out in the first round. I think it's going to be really competitive. Depending on what your bookies offer, over 1.5 might be a good parlay piece. To start round 2 would be a really good one as well. I'm sure it's juiced. I haven't checked that actual line yet. I'm sure it's not the greatest odds, but I don't see them finishing each other in the first round, even though Flick that's a lot of his wins. Charles is very defensive on the grappling side of things. He fights behind Charles fights behind his straights really well. I just don't like when he starts winging shots when he doesn't have to. He's got a great 1-2. He's got a great check 2. He's got a great check hook. And then I just notice him start to open up a little bit. I could just see Jimmy clinching at one of those moments and finally starting to work his game plan as well. So it's a closer matchup than these odds are pointing at. I understand why, I just don't think that's accurate. I could see maybe like minus 250 Charles is like a super accurate line right there with the layoff, with the style matchup. But man, that's a big, big line to be paying that kind of price. Can he pay that minus 450 line? I mean, he was minus 180, minus 200 versus Jaglas, and he definitely didn't pay it. I know all of us in the Discord that had money on Charles were clenching our body parts as we waited for the decision. So on that one, I would say take an over. If you like either one, I would take Charles points prop. And if you want to take Jimmy, like, decision no bet would probably be the best way to go if you want to ensure either getting money back or just still coming out on top. I don't see Jimmy winning the entire decision if he does all 3 rounds. I could see him getting some top game going, but I think Charles just moves too much to allow Jimmy to win decisively, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So Charles decision would be a good prop, and then Jimmy decision no bet would be a good play if you're on that side. But I think either way, an over 1.5, and then maybe even starts round 3 would be a good play there. Moving on, we're going to go to Dan Argueta versus Nick Aguirre. I've seen Nick fight on the Fury FC card recently, and that's the only one I've been aware of him. This fight just got signed days ago. I was already doing some diving on Dan, and I was actually going to be playing against Dan in this fight originally, in the original matchup, but of course that got canceled. I liked Isaac originally, simply because of the athlete he was and the way he finds openings with his wrestling. But I can't talk about that one, so we got to move on. Dan is efficient. He doesn't do anything crazy. You're not going to see Dan do spinning back kicks. He's not going to throw a jumping elbow. He's not going to do a flying armbar. But he does everything efficient. He throws 100% when he has to. He peppers you up when he needs to set his shots. He's very strong. I mean, you can see just by his build, the man's built like a triangle with a bowling ball on top for a head. And I think that there's not really a spot for Nick to win here. He's a good athlete, man. I was just checking out his Instagram a bit, and he's been training for a good while with good gyms. But on such short notice to fight a guy like Dan, who can 100% win all 3 rounds in this fight and grind out Nick, and maybe even find a late rear naked choke, that's Dan's signature move there. I just don't see a path of victory for Nick. If you like playing dogs and want to sprinkle it, once again, it would be a finish no bet. But I really don't see Nick just finding his moments in there. Dan's been training with Cub Swanson and their guys for a while now. Took some short notice fights in the UFC, so he's down to bang whenever it needs to be. He took the short notice fight once again, so his most recent fights are short notice opponents or a short notice fight himself. So he's always ready. Went through the Ultimate Fighter, didn't do the best, but he had success. I think he earned fans when he took short notice fight recently against Jackson. So once again, I think Dan is a really good parlay piece. He's a little juiced right now. I think he's already gone up to -700 on certain books. Not sure if we'll be playing him yet, but I just don't see a way that he loses without getting caught. Dan should win decisively here. I would say play an over if you like it, but I just don't know how ready Nick has been prior to this. Was he training for a regional fight? Was he just training day to day? Was he not training at all? No one posts that they don't train on social media. You know what I mean? You can only say so much from social media when it comes to activity. I only post myself once every couple weeks. I train 6 days a week, multiple times a day sometimes, but I only post once every couple weeks. I don't like to everybody know what's going on. So we don't know what the same is on that end for Nick Fiore when all we have is Instagram. We don't get to see him on social media as much actively as we do other fighters because he's just coming into here. So there's just not much to go on for him cardio-wise. Oh man, I said Nick Fiore. I meant Nick Aguiar, right? My apologies on that last one. Got too many multiple names on this